San Pietro was a quiet coastal town tucked between green hills and the restless sea. Fishing boats filled the small harbor, their ropes creaking softly against wooden docks. Every morning before sunrise, the fishermen left the shore, and every evening they returned with tired hands and stories carried by the wind. Life in San Pietro moved slowly. The same baker opened his shop at dawn. The same church bells rang every hour. And the same people crossed the town square every day on their way to work, greeting one another like family. Nothing extraordinary had happened there for many years. At the far end of town stood a small hospital. It was old and simple, built decades earlier when the town was much smaller. The paint on the walls had faded, and some of the doors creaked when they opened, but everyone trusted the people who worked there. The nurses knew every family in town. They had held newborn babies, comforted injured fishermen, and cared for the elderly who had spent their entire lives near the sea. One of those nurses was Sophia. Sophia had worked in the hospital for almost 10 years. She had seen many difficult nights, storms, accidents, sickness, but she had also seen many recoveries that felt like small miracles. Most nights were ordinary, but one autumn evening was different. The sky began to darken before sunset. Thick clouds gathered above the sea, and the wind grew stronger with every passing hour. By nightfall, rain was falling heavily across the town. The streets were almost empty. Store owners closed their doors early, and fishermen secured their boats tightly along the docks. Inside the hospital, the emergency room was busy. People arrived soaked from the storm. An old fisherman with a deep cut on his hand, a young woman who had slipped on the wet street and injured her wrist, and a small boy named Luca, burning with a dangerous fever. Luca's mother sat beside his bed holding his hand tightly. Her eyes were filled with fear as the doctors tried to lower the boy's temperature. Sophia moved quickly between the beds, preparing medicine and helping the doctor check Luca's condition. The boy's breathing was uneven. His fever was rising. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The hospital windows shook slightly as the wind pushed against them. Sophia felt the long night stretching ahead of her. But suddenly, the hospital doors opened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet movement as someone stepped inside from the storm. Sophia turned toward the entrance. A woman stood in the doorway. She wore a pale blue cloak over a simple white dress. Rain had touched the fabric, but strangely it did not seem soaked like everything else outside. Her face was calm, peaceful, almost as if the storm around the town did not disturb her at all. For a moment, Sophia simply watched her. Visitors rarely arrived during storms, and something about this woman felt unusual, not frightening, just different. Sophia walked toward her. "Good evening," she said kindly. "Are you looking for someone?" The woman looked gently around the room. Her eyes moved slowly across the hospital beds, the nurses, the doctors working quickly beneath bright lights. Then she answered quietly, "I came because someone here needs help." Sophia assumed she meant a family member. "Who?" she asked. The woman's gaze moved across the room once more, and then it stopped. It rested on the small hospital bed near the wall, on the boy named Luca. Without another word, the woman began walking toward him, and something about the way she moved made the busy hospital room suddenly feel calmer. The woman walked slowly through the hospital room. Her steps were quiet, almost gentle, as if she did not want to disturb the busy doctors and nurses moving between the beds. Yet something strange happened as she passed through the room. The noise seemed to soften. Not completely silent. Machines still beeped, nurses still spoke to patients, but the tension in the air felt lighter, as if the storm outside had suddenly lost its strength. Nurse Sophia followed her with curious eyes. There was something familiar about the woman's presence, though Sophia could not explain why. The woman stopped beside the bed where Luca lay. The small boy was pale, his forehead shining with sweat. His breathing was fast, and the thermometer beside the bed showed his fever was still dangerously high. Luca's mother sat beside him, holding his hand tightly. When she noticed the woman standing near the bed, she looked up with confusion. "Excuse me," the mother said nervously. "Are you looking for someone?" The woman knelt beside the bed. Her movements were calm, almost comforting. "What is his name?" she asked gently. "Luca," the mother answered quietly. The woman looked at the boy and smiled softly. "He is very brave," she said. Sophia stepped closer, watching carefully. The woman placed her hand lightly on the boy's forehead. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Luca's breathing began to slow. The tight lines on his face relaxed slightly, as if he could feel the calm voice even through the fever. The room felt peaceful. Even the rain against the windows seemed softer. Luca's mother wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "The doctor said the fever is very strong." The woman looked at her with deep kindness. "Do not be afraid," she said quietly. "Your son is not alone." Her voice carried a warmth that made the frightened mother take a slow breath. For the first time that night, the woman's hands stopped trembling. Sophia watched carefully. She had worked in the hospital long enough to recognize fear in parents' faces. But she had never seen comfort appear so quickly. "Who are you?" the mother asked softly. The woman looked at her. "A mother," she answered. The simple words felt strangely powerful in the quiet hospital room. At that moment, the doctor returned with fresh medication. "All right," he said quickly. "Let's try to bring this fever down." Sophia turned to help prepare the foreline. For only a moment she looked away. When she turned back, the woman was no longer beside the bed. Sophia blinked. She looked toward the door. The hallway was empty. No footsteps. No sound of the door opening. It was as if the woman had simply disappeared. Sophia stepped into the corridor and looked both directions. The storm had begun to calm outside. Rain tapped softly against the hospital windows. But the hallway was completely empty. Confused, Sophia returned to Luca's room. The boy was sleeping peacefully now. His breathing was steady, and for the first time that night, the doctor looked relieved. "Good," he said quietly while checking the thermometer. "The fever is starting to drop." Sophia looked at Luca's face. Then she glanced toward the empty doorway, and she wondered who the mysterious woman had really been. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky above San Pietro was clear again, and sunlight slowly spread across the quiet streets. Fishing boats returned to the harbor, and the town began waking to another ordinary day. But inside the hospital, something unusual had happened during the night. Nurse Sophia arrived early for her morning shift. She had barely slept. The memory of the mysterious woman in the blue cloak stayed in her thoughts all night long. There had been something in the way the woman spoke, something calm and deeply comforting that Sophia could not forget. As soon as she entered the hospital, Sophia walked directly toward Luca's room. The boy had been dangerously ill when she left the night before. His fever had been high, and the doctors had been worried about how his body would respond. But when Sophia quietly opened the door, she stopped. Luca was awake. He was sitting up in bed with a blanket around his shoulders, drawing on a piece of paper with colored pencils. His mother sat beside him smiling, her face filled with relief instead of fear. Sophia stepped inside slowly. "How is he feeling?" she asked. The mother looked up. "Much better," she said softly. "The fever broke sometime during the night." Sophia walked closer. Luca looked up at her and gave a small smile. "Good morning," he said. His voice was still weak, but it was clear. Sophia felt a deep wave of relief. "That's wonderful news," she said gently. The doctor entered a moment later and checked Luca's temperature again. "Looks like the medication finally did its job," he said. "He's going to be all right." Luca's mother wiped tears from her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. After the doctor left the room, Sophia hesitated for a moment. Then she asked quietly, "Did anyone visit during the night?" The mother shook her head. "No," she said. "Just the doctors and nurses." Sophia frowned slightly. "What about a woman wearing a blue cloak?" The mother looked confused. "No," she said slowly. "I didn't see anyone like that." Sophia looked down at the paper Luca was drawing on. "Can I see your picture?" she asked. Luca turned the drawing toward her proudly. Sophia felt her breath stop. The drawing showed a hospital bed, and standing beside the bed was a woman wearing a long blue cloak. Her hand rested gently on the boy's forehead. Above her head, Luca had drawn a small circle of light. Sophia's heart began to beat faster. "Who is this?" she asked quietly. Luca smiled. "The lady who came to see me." Sophia knelt beside the bed. "What did she say?" Luca thought for a moment. "She said my mama was brave," he answered. "And she told me not to be afraid." The room suddenly felt very still. Sophia looked again at the drawing. The blue cloak, the gentle face, the calm presence. Later that afternoon, when her shift ended, Sophia walked home through the town square. The sun was warm, and the storm felt like a distant memory. As she passed the old church, something caught her eye. In the small garden beside the church stood a stone statue, a statue of the Virgin Mary. Sophia slowed her steps. The statue wore a flowing cloak carved from pale stone. a cloak that looked exactly like the one the mysterious woman had worn. Sophia stepped closer, and suddenly, a quiet understanding filled her heart. Sophia stood in the small church garden for a long moment. The statue of the Virgin Mary looked down gently toward the stone path, where flowers grew along the edge of the garden wall. The afternoon sunlight touched the statue's face, giving the pale stone a soft golden glow. Around the garden, the town of San Pietro moved peacefully through its day. People crossed the square. Children ran past the church steps. The distant sound of waves rolling against the harbor reached the quiet garden. But Sophia stood still. Her thoughts returned again to the night before. The storm, the frightened mother beside Luca's bed, and the calm woman in the pale blue cloak. Sophia slowly stepped closer to the statue. Her heart felt strangely peaceful. "Was it you?" she whispered softly. Of course, the statue did not answer. But the wind moved gently through the leaves of the nearby trees, and the church bells rang quietly across the town. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't need proof. Some things did not need to be explained. The next morning, Sophia returned to the hospital for her shift. The hospital halls felt different now, not because the building had changed, but because Sophia had. When she entered Luca's room, she found the boy sitting up in bed, laughing with his mother. Someone had brought him a small toy boat from the harbor gift shop. He pushed it across the blanket as if it were sailing across the sea. The doctor smiled when he saw Sophia. "Good recovery," he said. "The fever broke at the perfect time." Sophia nodded politely. But deep inside, she remembered the moment when the woman had placed her hand gently on the boy's forehead. She remembered the calm voice that had filled the room. "Do not be afraid." Throughout the day, Sophia helped patients the same way she always had. She bandaged cuts. She comforted worried families. She spoke kindly to people who felt frightened and alone. But now she carried something new inside her heart. Hope. That evening, as the sun slowly lowered behind the hills, Sophia walked home through the town square again. The sky was painted with soft colors of orange and pink. When she passed the church garden, she stopped once more beside the statue of the Virgin Mary. And this time she noticed something different. Resting gently in the statue's open hand was a small white flower. It had not been there before. No one stood nearby. No one was walking through the garden. Sophia smiled quietly. "Thank you," she whispered. The evening breeze moved softly through the garden. The church bells rang again as the town settled into night. And somewhere beyond the quiet streets of San Pietro, Sophia wondered if the Virgin Mary still walked quietly through the world. Not in grand displays or loud miracles, but in the quiet places where people needed comfort the most. In hospital rooms, in frightened hearts, in the silent moments between fear and hope. Because sometimes the greatest miracles are not the ones everyone sees. Sometimes they are the quiet ones, the ones that remind us that we are never truly alone.